Another of the great Sung masters of landscape, that is Tang, and another, fortunately, from whom we have a major, large, reliable work, signed work, and moreover with a date. We'll see several other paintings associated with Tang, and we'll see one with an old attribution to a different artist, which was long ago reattributed to Tang by myself and published as his work. We're going to see several signed and reliable works also by followers of Tang, which means that we can not only construct an oeuvre or a body of extant work for the artist himself, but we can also chart his following through 2 generations probably. This is all very new, and it allows a kind of art historical neatness that I haven't been able to do in the earlier lectures. It's a neat enough pattern even to allow us to reject as Tang's work a couple of paintings, very fine paintings, which have one of them with I think an interpolated Tang signature, which for many years were taken to be the work of Tang, and big arguments went on about whether they could possibly be buying them. You'll see it. This is the Kotuin landscapes, and I believe they belong much later, around the end of Sung. And I'm also going to begin showing in this lecture photos of real landscape, real scenery, just to show how the artists were able to transform what they saw in nature into artistic forms. All these pleasures and revelations, I hope they're that anyway, are waiting for you in what follows. It is Lecture 9A. I'll give a bit of history before we go on looking at the paintings as before. Beginning with the periods that preceded this, that is the Northern Sung, from the late 10th to the early 12th centuries. The strength of the Northern Sung administration had been the civil service, the examination system by which men attained official rank through examinations. The ideal type of scholar, statesman, cultural figure had been established in the Northern Sung. Men who were successful in the exams, that is, who were appointed to government service in the capital or in the provinces, and they were rotated from position to position. The greatest height of prosperity was reached in this period, that is the earlier part of the Northern Sung. But in the late Northern Sung, there was a general decline in the government, brought about mainly by the attempted reforms of a prime minister, or the equivalent of prime minister, Wang An-shi, 1021 to 1086. A person about whom there's obviously strong differences of opinion depending on how you judge his attempts at reform. He favored government interventions in the economy, control of trade, something he called the ever-normal granary, which stocked grain when it was plentiful and then dispensed it when it was scarce. Controlled economy. He wanted to make the exam system more slanted toward practical ability instead of just knowledge of the classics. He was for government loans to farmers and so on. Well, he met with an entrenched bureaucracy, and his reforms were, in effect, nullified by the reaction of this conservative backlash. Excuse me, this is the winter of 1909 to 10. Excuse me if I think of poor Barack Obama up against the Republicans in Congress. Okay, anyway. So this Republican backlash included people who we saw as artists and calligraphers last time, such as the great Su Shi or Su Dongpo and Mi Fu and others. They were part of this conservative faction. Okay. Then to the last emperor of the Northern Sung, Huizong, what had been difficulty turned to disaster. He ascended the throne in 1101 at the age of 19. He was an aesthetic emperor. He had associated with artists and litterateurs and others in his youth. The brilliance of his court and his extravagances further exhausted the empire, and there were peasant uprisings and other troubles. The Grand Counselor, the Prime Minister in our term, this time a man named Cai Jing, appointed in 1102, dismissed, reappointed, and so on, finally dismissed in 1120. He was another reformer, like Wang An-shi, trying to reform education, the economy, agriculture, and so on. Huizong, on the other hand, was increasingly obsessed with music and Taoism and other matters that caused him to neglect his rule. Now, all this is the old interpretation from books from, the 1950s and so on. In other words, things I read when I was teaching. New books can take a very different stand, and I definitely recommend them to your attention. In the next lecture on bird and flower painting, when I talk about the painting of the Emperor Huizong and his court, I will recommend very strongly recent books by Professor Patricia Ebry, University of Washington, and Maggie Bickford, a respected colleague in the field of Chinese art history. So what I'm saying is, I say it very old-fashioned, and we believe they are more reliable than I. Meanwhile, the Jurchens, who were nomadic people who originally lived up beyond the Liao, the Khitans, that is outside of what we think of as China proper, had rebelled against the Liao, and the Sung dynasty allied with the Jurchens against what they took to be the common enemy, the Liao. And after the Liao was put down or driven out, the Jurchens simply moved in and captured Kaifeng, the capital of the north, in 1126. Huizong was taken prisoner. The northern Sung's dynasty ended. Battles continued between the Chinese and the Jurchens, and eventually the Huai River, a river that runs through more or less the center of China, with the Yellow River above and the Yangtze River below. Anyway, the Huai River was taken as the boundary between the two. The Jin dynasty, as the Jurchens called their rule. The Jurchen capital was located at Peking, or Beijing, in 1153. Now, in 1135, the Sung Emperor Gaozong, who succeeded Huizong, fled down to the south to Nanking, and first established the capital there, and then in 1138 established a new capital at Linan, which in modern Hangzhou, down below the Yangtze River. A great general named Yue Fei was trying to continue the fight against the Jurchens, but he was recalled, executed, and a really ignoble peace was established in 1141. There's still a shrine to him on the shores of the West Lake in Hangzhou, where you can go. Here is a view of the modern city of Hangzhou, seen from a nearby hill across the West Lake. The location of the imperial palace was around the upper middle of this image, or a bit to the right of that. Before it, and the great scenic attraction of the city, is the West Lake itself, a man-made shallow lake divided by man-made dikes with bridges under which the boats can pass, and islands. Very famous scenery, known to everybody in China, more or less. Next, please. Looking the other way, we see these famous dikes and islands. Boating on the West Lake, where noisy motorboats are banned, has been one of the pleasures of Hangzhou from Sung times until now. The southern Sung, which lasted nearly 2 centuries longer, although it was politically weak and geographically cramped or constricted, was very prosperous, and the Painting Academy flourished, produced great masters, as we'll see, and we have a great age of painting, actually, for the next 2 centuries in this constricted area down in the south. I'll also show some things from the north, from the Jin dynasty, but separately. In an earlier lecture, I recommended highly, as an aid to understanding what happened in Chinese culture during the Sung dynasty, the book by Peter Ball, titled This Culture of Ours, Intellectual Transitions in Tang and Sung China, published in 1992. I still recommend it highly, but now I have an addition to make. At a professional meeting in Honolulu last March, I ran into Peter Ball, and I spoke briefly with him, telling him how much I still thought of his book. He was pleased, but he said also that he has a more recent book I should buy and read, the one now on screen, Neo-Confucianism in History. I've acquired this, and I'm reading it. Those who have watched the previous lectures know how I want to see the big development of Sung painting, especially the rise of a monumental landscape tradition, against a background of Neo-Confucian thought. So for those of you seriously interested in this subject, I recommend this book without having finished reading it all the way through myself. Before I show and talk about the paintings by the first great major landscapist of the Southern Song Academy, that is Tang, I want to show two hand scrolls that were done under Huizong, or in the one case, the second one shortly after Huizong. The first of these is by an artist named Wang Ximeng, and who was born in 1096 and died in 1119. And the painting, A Long Hand Scroll, was done when he was only 18 years old. Brilliant young man. And it was inscribed. You see the inscription here at the left of this these two reproductions, inscribed by Cai Jing, the prime minister, in 1113, and it was made to present to the emperor. The painting is titled A Thousand Li of Rivers and Mountains, and it's in the Palace Museum in Beijing. It's 12 meters long and done in bright colors on silk. Well, this reproduction you're seeing now was published in China Pictorial, a picture magazine, and it's all we knew of the painting for a long time. So when we went to Beijing, this must have been in the 1973 delegation, we were very excited about seeing this painting. We asked for it especially because this made it look so great. I can only say the painting was a strange kind of disappointment. Let's have the next slides, please. Here's a section of it, an actual slide, which shows the brilliant blue and green colors that are used throughout the painting. They must have given this young man real pots of blue and green mineral pigments. And of course, this produces a landscape that not only has archaistic tones, that is, references to the past, back to the powerful Tang dynasty when blue and green landscape was used, but also signifies a prosperous, fruitful realm and flatters Huizong by association, by symbolically, so to speak. So it was very much a political move to paint this kind of landscape and present it to the emperor. But you can see here in the detail, here's a detail close-up of some boats and people. The drawing of the boats and people is really pretty dull. Nothing happens. They're all just stock figures. And the boats are not very interesting. And the trees are painted without any particular interest. And throughout the painting, that's true. Here's a couple more sections showing a house. Now, what we found is this. It was really quite funny and strange. The first 5 or 6 feet or so of the painting, maybe 2 meters, whatever. The painting, as I said, is 12 meters long. No, I didn't say that. Very long. Okay. The first 2 meters or so showed some sign of wear, as though it had been repeatedly rolled and unrolled. But after that, after you rolled for maybe 5 or 6 feet, it was as if it were brand new, like it was painted yesterday. In other words, over the centuries, people had rolled a bit and then realized it was not really very interesting and then stopped rolling. And the latter parts of it were just terribly fresh and new. Well, as we rolled, it became, as I say, more and more apparent that this young man had worked hard but didn't have much real talent and didn't have much imagination, and put very standard stock elements that he was painting, houses and figures and so on, and used a lot of this brilliant color, but no, didn't really produce a very interesting painting. Okay, that was certainly our opinion. On the other hand, a recent major multi-volume series of books on Chinese painting published in China, the Zhonghua Minghua Chuanji, or Chinese famous painting complete collection, in their volume on Song painting devotes no less than 25 color plates of this scroll. This is far more than any other artist or painting gets in this series. Well, I think the decision to devote so much to it depended on this question of imperial approval, Huizong's and Cai Jing's inscription and the association with this famous emperor, and the inscriptions and the authenticity and so on. In other words, this was a book reader's choice to devote that much space and beautiful color plates to it, not by any means the decision of a painting looker. A painting looker would have chosen the painting we're about to